friends! I'm making a reading wrap-up every Monday until I'm all caught up. We're really making progress. Now I'm only 6 months behind. So let's talk about June of 2021. I finally felt comfortable enough to dine in at a restaurant. Summer was starting. I missed every single Pride event going on around the city because being around any amount of people stressed me out. And also I read 11 books. So let's start by talking about young adult contemporary fiction. I read 5 young adult contemporary fiction books, including 2 comics. I was lucky enough to read Heartstopper Volumes 1 and 2 by Alice Oseman. People have been recommending Heartstopper to me pretty much throughout the whole pandemic, really ever since I started that Google Sheets page on LGBTQ+ books. I've gotten a recommendation to read Heartstopper at least once a month, every month since then. This is an adorable story about 2 boys who fall in love with each other. Hopefully. Eventually. Maybe. One who is openly gay and was bullied at their all-boys school when he came out the year before, and another boy who has dated girls before and he's liked them, and he's quite sporty, but he really values the friendship of this new boy he's been hanging out with, and maybe he's starting to feel romantic feelings as well. Heartstopper has beautiful bisexual representation, lovely art. I especially like the details that went into the settings of the story. I liked this book enough to buy the first volume of the story from my local comic book shop, which only happens for books I want to reread. And I'm giving the first 2 volumes of Heartstopper by Alice Oseman 4 stars. I was able to pick up Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating by Adiba J. Gadar. You might remember me raving about Adiba J. Gadar's debut novel, The Henna Wars, and I am delighted to say that Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating has cemented Adiba J. Gadar's place as one of my favorite authors. This book takes place in Dublin and is about 2 Bengali girls who are the only brown girls in their year at school. Hani is popular, she feels connected to her Muslim faith, and she's out to her parents as bisexual, and they're supportive. Ishu is studious, introverted. She's growing up in the shadow of her older sister as a closeted queer kid. When Hani comes out to her best white friends as bisexual, they dismiss her. So she blurts out that she is dating Ishu, who agrees to go along with this fake dating ruse if Hani helps her become head girl so she can impress her parents. As a queer Thai person who grew up in predominantly white areas in America, I really felt connected and protective of these girls. I love the way that Adiba J. Gadar builds character and layers identity to add complexity to each and every character she writes. I wish I had books like this when I was a teenager, but I suppose I'm lucky enough to have them now. I can't wait to read Adiba J. Gadar's next book. I'm giving Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating 5 stars. Next, I read another diaspora book, Darius the Great Is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. This is about a Persian teenager who visits his grandparents in Iran for the very first time, as his grandfather is dying. Darius is constantly bullied back home in America for being Persian, for loving The Hobbit and Star Trek. On top of all of this, he has clinical depression and a father who is constantly nitpicking everything he does. On this trip to visit his mother's family, he feels more at home than he has his entire life in America. And maybe it's being surrounded by family who has loved him his whole life from such a distance, or maybe it's his new best friend Sarab who invites him into his life with such willingness and joy. But he finally feels like a real Persian and like he belongs where he is. His problems aren't solved by this trip, and of course this trip will end. But I think this is a beautiful story about being welcomed back into a place where they were holding space for you. I'm giving Darius the Great Is Not Okay by Adib Khorram 4 stars. For our next book in young adult fiction, let's talk about Tweet Cute by Emma Lord. It is in fact cute. This is about 2 teenagers in New York who get into a Twitter feud through the business Twitter accounts they run for their family. Pepper is relatively new to New York, and her family's little restaurant has taken off big in the last few years and is now looking to franchise internationally. But the only social media person on staff is just too nice and sweet to run several corporate accounts on their own, or go for the snark the board wants to see on Twitter. So it falls to the owner's teenage daughter, Pepper. Jack runs the Twitter account for his family's little deli that has been there for generations and is a staple in the community. When he sees that a giant corporation stole his grandmother's recipe, he is understandably angry and decides to take them on. The 2 eventually realize that they're fighting their classmates, and the rivalry only intensifies from there. As someone who has run social media accounts for a few businesses at this point, I loved this book. It really made me think that I deserve a raise and people should respect this job more because it's labor. This book felt It felt soft, gooey, with the occasional hard edge. Kind of like a perfect grilled cheese. I think Emma Lord wrote exactly the book she wanted to write with this one, which was a fun, well-written, and light-hearted romance. I'm giving Tweet Cute by Emma Lord 4 stars. Moving on to the next genre, let's talk about the 5 fantasy books I read. This includes 4 comics. First, let's talk about the only book I read that was entirely text. I finished the Mistborn series. I read The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. Originally, I wasn't the biggest fan of the series. I thought the conversations surrounding race were heavy-handed at best and actively harmful at worst. In particular, I found Sazed as a character problematic in the first book due to the reliance on Orientalism Sanderson used while writing him. However, as I read the series, I could see not just the character growing, but Sanderson growing in his writing skill and his sensitivity to systems of oppression that he probably doesn't want to perpetuate through his writing. I don't think I would have read the 3rd book if I hadn't seen some of these problems start to be corrected in the 2nd. As for The Hero of Ages, this story is apocalyptic. It is the 3rd and final book in the series, and it takes place as the world is ending and our heroes desperately try to save it. This book is filled with adventure, magic, and a steady streak of desperation that you cannot help but be taken in by it all. It is a story that keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire time while you're reading it. I am giving The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson 5 stars. I've talked about Lumberjanes a lot on this series, so I read Lumberjanes Volume 18, Horticultural Horizons, and all I have to say is sometimes the villain is a magical invasive plant species and people should work out their issues instead of forcing it onto the next generation to give them therapy. I also read all 3 volumes of White Sand by Brandon Sanderson. These comics were illustrated by Rick Hoskin, Julia Scopez, and Fritz Casas, I believe. I thought these books were terrible. I thought these books were made by someone who has never seen what a comic looked like, because the entire layout, especially in the first 2 volumes, were incredibly difficult to read. I also found the lettering very challenging. Artistically, I think so much of the book just having a color palette of beige was uninteresting and failed to keep me engaged. Additionally, the actual story itself was messy. It was often unclear what was going on, what the rules of the magic system were, and it was difficult to differentiate characters from each other. I felt like the society felt somewhat unreal to me, as so much of what was going on wasn't fleshed out, and I didn't really get a feel for what the day-to-day lives of our main characters were, or really saw them interacting with other members of society outside of their insular groups of what we believe to be spectacular and unusual cases for people. I do think that when the illustrator changed between volumes, it solved some, but not all of the problems the series had. I'm giving White Sands by Brandon Sanderson, Rick Hoskin, Julia Scopez, and Fritz Casas 2 stars. Finally, I read one romance book in June. I read the adult romance Beach Read by Emily Henry. Although I have read several young adult romances throughout the years, I am interested in reading more books aimed at my demographic, and I think this was a really great place to start. It is about a writer who escapes the city when she has writer's blocks, and her next door neighbor is this guy from college that she hates. She felt he looked down on her romance book, and she hates the cynical literary fiction he writes, and how it is held above the genre she writes in because it is written primarily for men. It's a great enemies to lovers story. I think the romance itself was great, but honestly the parts that felt most real to me were the sections on writer's block. I don't write fiction anymore, but I still felt that somehow the author was speaking directly to me about how agonizing it is to need to do something but being unable to, especially when that was such a big part of your identity for such a long time. I'm interested in exploring this genre further, and I might pick up a few of Emily Henry's other books as well. I'm giving Beach Read by Emily Henry 4 stars. Alright friends, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think of me integrating comics into the genres they're written in instead of having them as their own section? Because, you know, I want to know. And if you want to see more from me, please subscribe, watch another video of mine, or support me on Patreon. And hey, I love you.